Have you noticed how often the biggest decisions in the world right now feel rushed? Like someone got embarrassed on Tuesday, and by Friday, we're moving aircraft carriers. There's this strange pattern where limits show up a court ruling, a political loss, a negotiation that doesn't go your way. Instead of recalculating, the volume just goes up. And when volume becomes a strategy, things escalate fast. Tonight, we're talking about what happens when impulsivity meets power and why hope is not a plan. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's go. This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you. Hey, I'm David. I got my 20 plus years in the military. I am a board certified psychiatrist, twice over. I today have a big old glass of water with ice in it because damn, it's been a busy day and it's going to continue to be busy. So that's what I'm going with.
It's Rob, 30 years in the military, 26 now in psychiatry. I actually have some Buffalo Trace bourbon this afternoon.
Look at you go.
I hit all my key performance indicators today, did all the things. All my PKIs are in the positive. So let's have a bourbon.
I don't know that I deserve a bourbon at the moment. Maybe later today, but we'll see how it goes. Now, while we were preparing for this episode, I think we ran into, gosh, a bit of a hiccup. And that hiccup was that apparently we started a war, or what we assume will be a war. As I continue to try to figure out, Robbie, what the fuck are we going to talk about? More info keeps coming out. And the Ayatollah, he has ceased to be. So much stuff. Definitely wanted to address that elephant in the room before talking about anything else.
For our tens of listeners, we were pondering talking about Make America Healthy Again movement and the interesting psychology of that throughout this week. But as is often the case, the news cycle moves faster than our show does. Show. Calling this a show. That's funny. So yeah, all of a sudden we end up in a war. Not that we didn't see it telegraphed from a mile away, but here we are. And as you mentioned, they did take out a number of the Iranian leadership structure to include the head civilian leader, which I believe is actually in violation of the rules of armed conflict. He's not a combatant. So he can't really be targeted. Only combatants can be targeted. And because he is a civilian, it violates international rules of LOAC, laws of armed conflict. So that struck me when very clearly he was specifically targeted. I guess the fact that just a few months ago, we were conclusively promised that Iran's nuclear capability was completely eliminated in a previous airstrike. And the justification for this is their nuclear capability, claiming now all of a sudden that they have an imminent ability to strike the United States, which flies in the face of all the information we have
In physics,
in physics. Yeah, some things are mutable, some things are immutable. Physics being immutable, the reality is that I actually am semi-supportive of this. This has been 20 years in the making. The Iranians did not play this well. They apparently did not look at Iraq and see that brinkmanship with us is always a bad idea because when we want to be, we can be the overwhelming tsunami. Nobody can stand before the might of the United States military. It is unquestionably the most powerful military in the history of humankind in every conceivable way. And I realize between conflicts, there's this habit of starting to feel like maybe we're slipping, maybe the other countries are more powerful militarily, maybe they're tougher. Even our leadership, Pete Hegseth likes to say that we're slipping, that woke has made us lose a step. It's just not accurate. We are unequivocally the most powerful military force in the history of the world. fuck with us at your hazard. And they didn't have a really strong position, but psychologically they were stuck. We already established they have no air defenses. That was established in the last attack. So not only did they not have a strong military defensive force or even a very effective offensive force, as was established in the how many ever hundreds of drones and missiles that they launched at Israel that hit nothing. So they were lacking in that regard. But because that limited sliver of leadership that is so worried about maintaining its leadership, they played the brinkmanship because they didn't want to give up their power within Iran. Fuck around and see what you get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I believe his son is still alive. There has been some talk about his son, like making a triumphant return or whatever. I don't know maybe it's his grandson. Who knows?
Yeah, it's somebody in there commending, right? Well, if that's the case, you think it's going to go the way of Machado. So let's not kid
Yeah.
ourselves on that one.
Yeah. So from my standpoint, from a military standpoint, from a shit, this might impact Rob's standpoint, this is big news. This is a potential conflict that could easily spiral out of control. All the chess pieces are on the board now. And, there's the Houthis down in Yemen, the militias in Iraq. Hamas is still a presence that has kind of reconstituted since Israel hit them hard, but they have reconstituted. Actually, their missile capabilities have been reconstituted. There's a lot of players on the board to include apparently theorized sleeper cells here in the United States that could take action over this. So, depending on the course of events, this could definitely spiral.
I can certainly predict based off of nothing where I think this is going to go. None of our tens of listeners, I think, are tuning in to listen to you or me try to figure out
No,
what's going to happen.
we're not military analysts. Although,
Yeah,
David, did you just imply that ignorance of a topic has ever stopped you from having a well defined opinion about it? Because I don't think I believe that.
I can have a well-defined opinion. Whether or not I'm going to try to share that with the world. And as I said, I'm not drinking at the moment. So if I
Hmm.
were, perhaps I would be much more red-faced and willing to share said
Well, folks, let
opinion.
me tell you my opinion.
Yeah. But since I'm not there at the moment, maybe later today, who knows? I'm not going to try to go off and explain to everybody where I think this is going.
Mansplain it.
Time will probably more than likely give us a pretty good taste, right? Like I said, this is only a few days in the making, and we haven't really had time to figure out where this is all going. What I do want to draw attention to, though, what I originally wanted to talk about was something that built off of our last episode, because as I've been reflecting more and more, especially on my own past, as I've watched my kids grow, and most notably my youngest, who was the wildest of my children. It got me thinking, wow, there's a really interesting parallel to the behavior that I observed with my kids and the behavior that I see with our current sitting president. And it's something that really just dawned on me, which was that
David, you realize the brown shirts are going to show up at our door, both of them now. But
possibly,
you've crossed the
well, I've been
Rubicon on this one.
I think it's helpful for me to understand in that I guess I was making a lot of my assumptions on the behavior predicated on this idea that what I was observing was a 79-year-old man who has had a lifetime to develop a personality structure that was very, very similar to a lot of the authoritarian regimes that we are used to seeing.
Mhm.
But there's this piece that didn't really go along with it. It's that the driving force for so many authoritarian regimes has been this goal of maintaining power within the country that they're trying to take over. And in doing so, a typical authoritarian person would go out of their way to demonstrate competency as a leader. And that is completely lacking. In fact, if anything, last week we saw the Supreme Court overturn the IEEPA tariffs. And because they were so disastrous economically and politically, one would assume that an authoritarian leader would look at that as a huge win. Look, I wanted this, but I guess we can't have it, and it's their fucking fault. Yeah, they would ride the win of the economic policy and the political win of saying, look, I tried, but they took it away. But yet he's doubled down, right? Like he's actually gone in and said, I'm going to come up with a new way to force these tariffs, which are just taxes on the people. Like his understanding of the tariffs and how they function seems to be backwards.
So, what you're smacking at is something that has perplexed me. And when you presented this to me via text, I felt like you gave me a Rosetta Stone because where I have been flummoxed, it's a good word, flummoxed. I'm going to ask our tens of listeners to say it with me.
Lummoxed.
Flummoxed. Where I've been flummoxed is that in many, many ways, a narcissistic personality structure is how I have developed a mental model of our POTUS. What has always left me confused, I'll say it again, flummoxed, has been that there is often a lack of coherence to his actions. And you presented it in a lovely way, a way that all of a sudden I was like, oh, shit, you just cracked the code. When we look at someone who's 79 years old, we have the assumption that they have a fully formed personality structure. And what you're describing is someone who's arrested that in many ways they continue to become an adult. They had adult things, they did adult activities, whatever. But what you proposed was this reminds me of my 3-year old, which is what is it? I love you zero. I love you
Love you
zero.
zero. I love you zero. Well, it's not just I love you zero, but it's a lack of rationality in that narcissistic perspective. It's I want what I want when I want it, but not necessarily because of any other reason than I want it.
So it reminds me there was a study, a lovely study that they followed these kids throughout their lives. So they brought them in a room and they gave them a marshmallow and they said, "Hey, if you can wait 3 minutes, we'll give you a second marshmallow. So don't eat this for 3 minutes. We'll give you a second marshmallow." And a majority of the kids couldn't wait. They just immediately gobbled down the marshmallow, which really does imply it was a different time because how many kids would actually even know what a fucking marshmallow is now? So that's not candy. Piss on you.
Kids love marshmallows. Don't get,
No,
yeah, they fucking love them.
my kids
They
don't.
fucking love them. Oh, they love marshmallows.
My kids all bitch that the texture's not right. Somewhere along the line, one of the kids came up with this idea of texture, and they all just adopted it. That they just don't like the texture of. 'Em. Anyway, they're all weird. Love them, every single one, but weird. At any rate, this study looked at these kids, and the ones that impulsively immediately ate that. I mean, no thought to the future, no thought to the second order effects. Then they followed them out through their life. The ones that actually waited, because there was a smaller number, but a reasonable number, it was like, okay, I'll wait the 3 minutes. Big freaking deal. Give me a second. They end up going on in life and having reasonably positive lives with reasonable success because they could contain themselves and they could project themselves into the future. I'm absolutely convinced that had Donald Trump been associated with that study, he would have gobbled that son of a bitch up in about 1 second. 1 second, he would have just, whoa, they would not even heard the instructions. It would have been in his mouth.
I actually challenge that it wouldn't just be that he would gobble it up in 1 second. He would then try to convince the person who had left the room that they had eaten it themselves.
I didn't eat it. I didn't.
Just to fuck with them. You ate it.
We've got you on camera. No, you shit my pants.
No, you don't.
I didn't shit my
No, you
pants.
don't. But but that's it. And I guess it was so profound to kind of realize this. It got me.
Dude, ICE is going to show up at our doors now.
Possibly Christy Nome herself.
ICE is coming right now.
We're going to have our citizenship revoked.
Well, for our audience, David and I are we're so white, we're pink. We are about as European as two dudes can get. And the next thing you're going to know, you're going to see us on whatever news channel, handcuffed and stuffed into an ICE vehicle and accused of being Mexican.
There's a good chance, but I'm hopeful it's helpful for other people too to get the perceived mindset. I have no idea what's in the man's head. I have no idea what's going through there. What I can say is that the behaviors seem to match up much more with that. It match up more with a child who is just gets everything they want and then throws a fit when they don't than an authoritarian who has this long-term strategy for how they're going to gradually assume power by building up their own status to others. This is purely an I want it. I want my ego. I want everyone to appreciate me and praise me. And then anytime something deviates, nope, I love you zero. I
I love
hate
you,
you.
Zero. So I just ran to the window and looked outside just to make sure that ice wasn't out there. Because what I have certainly learned in the last year is you don't fuck with ice. You just don't. You'll get shot.
Right in the head.
Right. Luckily, they're not outside right now, but maybe later today I'll have a surprise. So, in keeping with this Iranian situation, what we saw, maintaining the frame here, is that they engaged in the high power negotiations with the negotiator of choice for Trump, which is Jared Kushner. Does Jared Kushner have any credentials? No.
Yeah, he got Ivanka Trump to fuck him.
All right. All right. Which,
I mean, that's a negotiator. Look at that guy.
good
Look at
on
her.
him.
Now, I will say
Good
to
on
this
him.
day, I've never heard her speak, so I don't know what her voice sounds like. But look at him. Look at her. The guy's a hell of a negotiator.
Apparently. So anyway, beyond the fact that he landed her, he's got no credentials, he's got no background, he's got no experience. Why he's both in charge of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia and with Iran, I don't know, other than tribal loyalty, which is the worst way to pick people. By the way, everyone, if you're going to pick someone to do your taxes, your brother-in-law who you like, not the guy. You don't want to do it.
Unless he's an accountant.
Unless, and in this case, he's not. They are engaged. Of course, the nature of these kinds of negotiations, we start moving our chess pieces. We bring in carrier groups. We stack up Ali Al Salim Air Base in Kuwait with extra airplanes. We do those things, which are signaling, hey, we've got power. But historically, you would have let this play out. I mean, they're not going to come to the table with their final offer initially. And the impulsivity of cutting through the red tape that was willing to allow it until he hit that point where the marshmallow was right there on the table. And then it was in his mouth before they even had a chance to start the stop clock.
I find interesting is that when you do go back to this series of tweets that people had pulled from Donald Trump's account before he was even president the first time, he had made these statements that, hear me now, Barack Obama is going to start a war with Iran and he's going to do it in order to get reelected. And that was in 2011. And then he's definitely going to attack them to make sure that he gets elected in early 2012. He was predicting after he was elected, he's probably going to attack Iran to save face. And then he was trying to remind people that Barack Obama is definitely going to attack Iran.
Which he never did, everybody. He didn't do it.
He didn't. What I find interesting about that isn't that he had made all these predictions and then 15, 14, and 13 years later did the same things himself. It's that he sees Iran as a get out of jail free card for whoever was in the presidency. He doesn't view the downstream effects, losing military members in a war. He never viewed that as being anything but, oh, well, it happens. If you are struggling and you need a win as president, do this thing.
It's also a blatant example of projection. That what he was doing was projecting what he would do on Barack Obama from a position, it is always easiest to be the guy who's not elected, who's complaining about the guy who is the leader. It's always easier to be the op four.
That should be the name of our show, by the way. Yeah.
So, for our tens of listeners, the Op 4 is the opposition force, and in all military exercises, there's a group that's designated the Op 4, and it's so much easier to be the Op 4 than it is to be the one who's actually in the hot seat, making the tough calls that actually count, that actually matter. And it is a sign of maturity when an opposition, the loyal opposition, how it's supposed to work, can be supportive of and understanding of and empathic of, but still disagree. That's fine. Disagreement is what our country's built on. But what Trump did that back in 2012, 2013 is just such obvious. I mean, particularly in light of how it all plays out, it's just such obvious projection that he was sitting there thinking, what would I do? I would do these things. So I'm going to project that over onto Obama. And interestingly, Obama, a totally different personality structure, totally different perspective. He did not do these things. He did not manipulate war, military in order to seal power. But Trump forecasted for us. He told us
Well,
what he was going to do. here we are.
He's consistently done that. It's that viewing the human life as collateral damage to a negotiation with no real long term strategy past that. Because what is the out here? Are we under the impression that Thomas Jefferson is going to rise from the ashes for the Iranian people and lead them into a democracy? I mean, and honestly, considering the direction we're going, is that even something that we would want?
Nah, be like, fuck you, Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Piss off. You're not trustworthy. After Vietnam, there was a set of criteria that were adopted that we have then, after the 80s, absolutely ignored. But the criteria was that the mission had to have a purpose, had to have an end state. And when we went into Vietnam, the purpose was a little nebulous and the end state was totally nebulous. Oh, and then it also has to be achievable by military means. And the military can do a lot. I mean, I'm perpetually amazed by Joe power that you can solve virtually any problem if you throw enough Joes at it. I have moved 6 tons with enough soldiers and no equipment. I do have a significant appreciation for Joe power. But in this case, why we attacked is unclear. What the end state is to cease attacks is unclear. It seems to me that their primary course of action was hope. Hope that the people of Iran will rise up, take over, and that the ensuing government will be better. Every lieutenant is quizzed on this one. Hope is not a course of action. And we have developed that as a course of action. Hope. All of our lines of effort now are based on hope. And yeah, we can bomb the shit out of Iran and we can do it with relative impunity. I mean, I imagine someone's unlucky and get shot down at some point because if you throw enough lead in the air, the golden BB effect comes into play. But I don't know where it stops. I don't know when we say enough is enough, we've achieved our mission objective because I don't know what the mission objectives are. Now, I'm also not sitting at the Pentagon and I've not been read in on this. There might be very clear objectives out there, and I'm not discounting that because I do have a lot of respect for the military leadership of this nation and their professionalism and their ability to think about these things. But ultimately, we're controlled by our civilian leadership. And if the civilian leadership sends a stupid mission, we're going to do that mission to the best of our ability, but it still might be stupid.
I think you're giving too much credit. I think this is more of the marshmallow. We had the ability, and the marshmallow was there. Hey, if you wait, we might be able to get some. Not just eat the marshmallow and then blame somebody else for it. Come up with a reason why the marshmallow was eaten and not waited on.
I didn't eat the marshmallow.
Yeah, you ate the marshmallow. I do agree that I think from the military leadership perspective, for the most part, I think if you say, hey, we want a plan of action to do X, Y, or Z, they will absolutely come up with the way to do it. Being at the lowest possible ranks to moving my way up. If a task was brought in, the response was never, no, we can't do it. It was just, okay, we'll do it. And then you would find a way. And so you weren't asking why. If anything, you may have wanted some clarification on what the end goal was, or at the very least. But if somebody said, we're going to attack Iran, you wouldn't say why. You would just figure out how to do that. And so I'm confident that happened, that they have a clear plan on how they were going to do that. But as far as what their end goal is, I don't know that would have been asked. This is a marshmallow sitting in front of somebody who is told, well, you can eat the marshmallow or you can wait until we've had more diplomatic talks. But you and I both know that a week ago, he said, I'm going to attack them within 10 to 15 days, which meant he was going to attack them in about 7. That is the secret sauce. ICE will come in and grab me now because I just described every other time he has done this. But whenever he says, I'm going to attack them in 2 weeks, he's just somehow trying to get them to let their guard down so that he can do it in 7 days. Whenever you ask me in the hospital, like how many alcoholic beverages do you drink in a day? They'll typically half their number. And so what do? We just double the number that they give us. So I think when Donald Trump says, how long is it going to take to be ready to attack Iran? And they said, sir, we could get this done in a week. He said, great.
3 days later,
He told everyone else, I'm going to attack you in 2 weeks. I think that's the equation that is used in his head, but it's a marshmallow. I think it's a marshmallow.
It's also interesting that it seems to follow the news cycle. So whatever the military reality is, this happened on a weekend. And
It
I
always
don't think
happens on a weekend.
I
It
know.
happens on like a Friday. It's a great news cycle day. The NFL does that. They like to do all of their punishments. They do them on Friday afternoon so that
Uh-huh.
it really doesn't hit the news cycle. As a military member who absolutely loved my Fridays when we would have our barbecues and all the other fun things that we do when we're not at war, I'd be pissed.
Well, you're also hitting on a thing, and this is a responsibility of the military, but for our tens of listeners who may or may not have served, you rise in rank by achieving, by doing, by being given a mission that seems impossible or difficult and finding the way. And you learn that from second lieutenant all the way up. And of course, you then have to lean in on your people, and it's often unfair to them, and they have to put in way more hours than what they're really wanting to put in. Yeah, if you're a decent officer, you figure out a way to manage that and to develop personal relationships and to be right there with them. But these folks who are at the highest echelons were born in that environment. So the problem with the structure that we have is that when the civilian leadership comes and says, we want you to do this, the military's default answer is, "Hua, we're going to do it," even if they don't really know if they can. And here's the other problem that if they tell you, "Sir, we can't do this," they're going to be replaced. And failure is not an option in the military, it's not an acceptable option. That failure is a failure of leadership. So these incredibly capable generals, and they are, I'm telling you, folks, I have worked with some brilliant people. I've been blessed. I often say the secret to my success has been dumb luck and the people I got stuck with. When you come up through the medical routes, you're accustomed working with a lot of really smart people. Docs, they're all smart. No, there's no such thing as a dumb doc. There's such thing as a dense doc. There's such thing as a concrete doc, but there's no such thing as a truly dumb doctor. And because we're stuck in this world, we often end up feeling like, those of us in this field are the smartest. And one of the best experiences of my life is working with these non medical generals who are just remarkable humans, absolutely brilliant in their ability to develop a mental model of something and then make it happen. It's remarkable. So these are very capable individuals. They have been sensitized to pleasing, to doing the mission, following whatever order they're given. And that's unfortunately what leads us into places like Vietnam, like Iraq, like Afghanistan. There's a book called Why We Lost, and it looked at Iraq and Afghanistan and really laid it at the feet of the 3 and 4 stars of the time because they didn't push back. One of the things that got me in trouble, but one of the things I'm most proud of in my command time was when I would push back and I would say, "Can't do it. And here's why. Here's my limitations. So this is what I need from you in order to accomplish it." And it never was well received. But when it played out, it was accurate. I wouldn't tell them I couldn't do it if I could do it. And we're just not great at that. And I just implied that I am, but I'm not. I just so happen to also be contrary enough. I mean, I've got this podcast, so clearly I've got a contrary streak.
Yes, generals, everyone I've ever I have not had a lot of FaceTime with generals throughout my career, but every last one that I ever met was a very impressive human being, man, woman. It didn't matter. They were just obviously very impressive. And their ability to connect with younger personnel it was amazing.
Brilliance.
Their political savvy, yeah, just off the charts. And that's what you have to get to that level. Here's the thing, and it's not about the generals. It's that the audacity of the belief that in order for one person to save face, they would start a war as just being a thought process. It is so the opposite of what we're used to. An authoritarian person would not say, I'm going to start a war as a distraction from my own embarrassment. They might start a war to consolidate power. They might start a war to take land, whatever, but they wouldn't start a war just to avoid some kind of embarrassment. And when you go back to 2013, 2012, it was definitely on his mind that somebody else would start a war to save face.
Projection.
That's projection, but it's a very simplistic viewpoint of the world. There's no downstream consequence considered in that. Like, it didn't occur to him that, of course, Obama wouldn't start a war just to save face. The potential for thousands and thousands of American lives, not to mention tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other lives, are not something that somebody typically would think, you know what? These people aren't liking me so much. I think I'm going to start a war. And yet, that was something he thought would happen. It lacks compassion, empathy.
Empathy. So, one of the things that has struck me about so far is that we apparently bombed a school, and at least the Iranians say, and we'll see how this plays out, that 100 ish children, little girls, were killed by one of our bombs. And when you engage in a war, and I learned this firsthand in Iraq, and I certainly wasn't in a position to make big decisions in my time in Iraq. I was in a position to see the suffering, to see the civilian death, to see the US soldier injury and death. And there's nothing funny about this. I'm trying to make it funny. There's nothing funny about it. It's haunting. It's absolutely haunting. And the moral outrage that I personally experienced watching these things, thinking of these individuals who are sitting in very comfortable offices, in very comfortable positions, not really suffering, not experiencing any suffering, no hardship, that make a decision that have these ramifications that resonate out through generation after generation. I think there's like 125, 130,000 Iraqis killed during Iraq. That's in the context of something like, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 US deaths. Now, we did have like 30,000 really serious injuries. So it's a little misleading when you just look at deaths. And having seen some of those injuries, they're horrendous. They were terrible. What I'm driving at here, folks, is that these are big fucking decisions. These are big ass decisions that affect humans, people, the loss of a mother, father, child, aunt, uncle, whatever. This is what actually is happening. That when we drop a bomb, there are real people who are being disintegrated by said bomb. And there are real people who are having their limbs removed from said bomb or being terribly injured by said bomb. And it is a little scary that the person that triggered this maybe lacks empathy. Maybe didn't have any.
Or thinks that it's just a way to get out of some hot political water to attack somebody else, to start a war.
Well, we are in political season now, aren't we?
I cannot tell you that that is the reason why he did it. What I can tell you is that he definitely has had that thought enough in the past to suggest that somebody else could, would, or should have that exact response to some kind of political embarrassment. And considering that the biggest political embarrassment of Obama's tenure was that he wore a tan suit to something, tells me that having one of your cabinet members appear aggressively in the Epstein files a couple of days before you attacked might be a little bit more embarrassing.
Let's talk about the Iranians purely from a psychological standpoint. I mean, right now, I have a feeling they're all sitting in a bunker right now, going, "Man, we fucked up. We really miscalculated this one." But we see this over and over again, particularly in the Middle East. Now, maybe that's because the Middle East has an outweighed importance, and this is where the bombs get dropped. Who knows? But what the fuck were these guys thinking?
What does the marshmallow think? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know what they're thinking. I imagine that the people who are not a fan of the current administration are, maybe they're happy if they're not getting blown up, if they weren't sitting in the school or had family members who were.
What I keep thinking about, and this isn't justifying the leadership of Iran. I think the leadership of Iran has turned out to be, as is often the case in governments that don't have good guardrails, they're corrupt and they have enriched themselves on the backs of their people. And, you know, what's the old this saying that it starts as a movement, becomes a business, and then becomes a grift? And they definitely made it to the grift stage where, you know, all the things that they believed in, their Islamic values and all that, really it came down to every one of the top leadership were ridiculously wealthy at the expense of their people. But when I think about how do we engage with these types of governments. Removing their avenues for survival seems to be a bad choice and drifts into the hope zone. What we did through the course of events here, and this starts back when the Iranians, the average Joe was, I doubt there's too many Iranians named Joe. Maybe there are. I don't know. Joe's a pretty common name. But when the average, when the average,
Whatever you say is going to sound racist. So just say your average citizen. Yeah,
the
just
average
maybe leave
citizen,
it as
thank
is.
you.
There you go.
Thank you for saving me there. I was really running myself down into a cul-de-sac that I just couldn't
Yeah, you were
I
not
could
having a good time.
I couldn't reverse course. I was stuck. But the average Iranian, they rose up and they were like, "Hey, this 40% inflation is untenable. We cannot live this way." And when you start tweeting out, not tweeting, but truthing, when you start truthing out, God, that's so narcissistic. Everything that comes out on Truth Social is, by definition, the truth. When you start truthing that they need to overthrow the government, that we're going to come support you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When policy is established at 3 a.m. on Truth Social, this is the kind of shit you end up in. And, I hope for the best. I really do. I would love to see the Iranian people have some fairness. Just fairness, just an opportunity. These douchebags that have been profiting off the backs of the average Joe, the average Iranian. Yeah, I don't feel bad for them, but I think that's my point is that it's hard to root for these jackasses, these douchebags, but it's still not in keeping with the norms of history.
There is so much more nuance that goes into a country. I had the same concern between when people were upset, or and still are, to be honest, when people talk about Israel and Palestine. These aren't football teams. It's not about wearing a jersey and being all in on one side or the other. There's so much gray area that exists between both sides that you can't just say one is all good and one is all bad, especially when we're talking about Iran, where a lot of their people are subjugated to these things. They're not the ones choosing it, but they are relatively powerless to change it. But when you go in and you just bomb the bejesus out of their country, you're going to strengthen their distaste of us. Just like anything else, you may agree with the ideals, with the ideas, the bigger pictures, but once they affect you negatively on a personal level, all of a sudden you have very different thoughts and beliefs about it. You might be able to compartmentalize that off, but we actually see this a lot here. You'll see people who are like, I can't stand or I can't understand trans people or LGBTQ people, but you'll say, well, what about your uncle? Well, he's different. And it's so compartmentalized. But when it impacts you on a personal level, like it's one of your kids who just died in their school. Now, all of a sudden, you're a warrior against the thing that did that, even
Yeah.
if you would have been in favor of it. Because nobody's saying, all three of my daughters died yesterday, but thank God those Americans are coming here to save us.
God, that kind of hit close to the bone, David. Thank you. Hey, our tens of listeners, we really strive to be humorous and lighthearted. David's awful at it, just terrible, just fucking awful. Anyway, yes. And you know what I'm always struck by is just how morbid David is. Also, struck by that I don't think we were designed to think on this scale as humans. That our formative environment, and I'm going to go out on the fringes here to those who are creationists, I apologize, still like and share. Please. But from a developmental standpoint, we really did develop in a small tribe universe. And most of our biological brain mechanisms still live on a small tribe universe kind of level. And what we're doing right now in a small tribe, there's your people and then there's everyone else. And your people matter. Everyone else does not matter. Everything else does not matter. Your people matter. And not only do we see in the current environment and social media's actually escalated this tribing up, We tribe up. We tribe up internally. We tribe up externally. But our ability to empathize with the other, because that tendency, that impulse to tribe up, that there's us and there's them, and they are different and they don't deserve the same kind of consideration. And here we sit in a modern world in which there's so many mechanisms to tribe up. There's so many reasons. I mean, there's just so many tribes out there. How do you keep up with them? That you can't. You can't empathize with everyone. It's too much for anyone to even ponder. And there's 100 little girls that died. That somebody was their daddy. Somebody was their mommy, and we did this. We did it. I want to believe there's purpose behind it. I want to believe that. I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time believing that there was.
Way to suck the funny out of our conversation. But hey,
Hell,
if we can have cathartic experiences while we're doing this, then why step away from it? Anyway, I think it highlights, I mean, as much as we want to try to be funny in what we think is funny, the reality is it can be really, really harsh, especially when it comes to not considering the long term consequences and those of other people. And so that's why I'd say it's silly to compare the behavior to that of a small child. The question I have then is it a lack of empathy, or is it a lack of capacity for empathy? When your behavior consistently shows the lack of capacity for empathy and you have control, and I guess that would be, at no point would I so much as hand even my car keys to one of my younger kids, much less the nuclear codes, because they don't act in rational long-term decision making ways. So yeah, it's concerning. Anyway, I think we have covered this topic pretty thoroughly, Robbie.
we
Do you have any
have.
prescriptions?
Hope is not a course of action. Hope is never a course of action. Courses of action have to be established as achievable and in keeping with the mission. And this whole thing smacks to me of hope, that there's a hope that the people rise up. There's a hope that they take over or can take over, which in the Iranian environment, I don't even know if that's possible. But hope is never a course of action that you tie your wagon to.
I'm going to go back to last week's rule. I think before you start a war, there needs to be a sandwich, a sippy cup, and a nap before deciding on war.
And I'm gonna add something. It has to be a McDonald's quarter pounder or a Big Mac because apparently that's the sandwich of choice.
Yes, fast food sandwich would be acceptable, a sippy cup or a soft
Diet
drink,
Coke,
something.
Diet
A
Coke.
diet beverage of some sort and a nap would be excellent prior to any command to attack another country. And that's about it for the week. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around. We really appreciate all tens of our listeners, and any other listeners you can think of, send them on over. Hit like, subscribe, say nice things if you can. We'll take them all. So that's pretty much it. We'll cue up that music, and we are out.